What's good everyone, welcome back to another Gnawy video. For those of you who are subscribed, this is the massive video I've been talking about, and to those of you who aren't subscribed, you need to go and click the subscribe button, first to help us to get to 1k, and second to stay in the loop with the Gnawy channel, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Mario Kart World. But you know what? Let's just get straight into talking about the best controller in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and probably the best controller for Mario Kart World. By the way, if you're watching this after Mario Kart World has come out, I'm making this video before that, and I will have an updated video about whether it works or not for everything in Mario Kart World. So about a year ago, Shortcat made a video saying that the GameCube controller is the best controller for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It made sense because the GameCube controller can save time for you on every glider and perfect your drifting. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, when motion controls are enabled, you can steer the kart using either motion controls or the left analog stick. However, in a glider, these inputs stack. This means that if you hold an up diagonal or an up 45-degree angle on the left stick, and simultaneously try to replicate that angle on motion controls while in a glider, you can tilt your car up to 90 degrees to the left or right. This technique allows you to gain significant speed if you angle your kart by drifting off the glider. Also, one little point I want to put in here, when you drift off the glider, make sure that the glider releases your mini turbo for you. You don't release the mini turbo yourself, you don't trick off the glider releases your mini turbo, and you're only supposed to motion glide after your mini turbo has been released. The only issue is that you have to be playing with motion controls on, and this can completely mess up your gameplay with even the slightest shaking of your hands. Some people get around this by quickly pausing the game to turn on motion controls and then quickly pausing the game after to turn them off if it's not the last lap, but this is extremely inconvenient and therefore isn't worth it, with a few exceptions like on the last lap of Mario Kart Stadium. But lucky for us, the same principle applies to the D-pad. If you have motion controls on, then the D-pad will act the same as motion controls. This means that you can tilt your kart just as much as you would with motion controls using the D-pad by holding the up left or up right direction on the D-pad and a 45-degree up angle on the left stick simultaneously. The only issue with this is that you still need motion controls on to do this. Now, you might be thinking, doesn't the GameCube controller lack a motion sensor? The answer is yes. But if you enable motion controls on the GameCube controller, you can still take advantage of the D-pad's motion stacking without experiencing that diabolical side effects of motion inputs. Now, in June 2024, I made a video talking about the Power A Spectra Enhanced Wired Controller. This is an officially licensed controller that doesn't have a motion sensor and also has back buttons. So if you set both of the back buttons to D-pad down, then you can just click them while holding a 45-degree angle on the left stick and motion glide. And yes, this does work even though you map both buttons to down on the D-pad. This motion glider is slightly slower than normal, but it's still much faster than normal glider vectoring, which is essentially motion glider but without the motion, so it's not all too much faster. This makes motion glider easier because then you don't have to reach your hand across the controller. The controller also has RGB, is really clean looking, and has anti-friction rings around the joysticks. This makes for a really good controller in general, and also what I said was the best controller for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. There was only one issue: the Spectra cannot perfect drifting for you. The GameCube controller has an octagonal gate around the stick, which, if you calibrate your stick slightly up, aligns perfectly with the angles for soft drifting, which is just below the 45-degree angle on the joystick. This pretty much only works on official GameCube controllers or really high quality ones, and you also need the official Nintendo GameCube controller adapter. I'm pretty sure third-party GameCube controller adapters do not allow you to remap buttons or calibrate your stick from my experience. It also doesn't work on the Nintendo Switch GameCube controllers, which have extra buttons for the Nintendo Switch. And by the way, I'm not talking about the Nintendo Switch Online Switch 2 GameCube controller. That thing is not out right now. I have no idea what works on that and what doesn't. So in my video, I concluded that you can learn to soft drift fairly easily, but motion gliding with that amount of ease is just not something you can learn. And while that's still kind of true, what if you didn't even have to calibrate your stick up? It could still motion glide without motion controls, and it was the best feeling controller you could ever feel. I present to you the Multishine custom modded GameCube controller. Now, even though Multishine did send me this controller to review, all thoughts in this video are my own, and I've tried to make everything as objective as possible, even disregarding my own point of view if I think it's biased. Multishine has been making modded GameCube controllers for years now, and are one of the biggest, most powerful names in Smash Bros. The mods in this controller include cut trigger springs for a faster press, perforated trigger pads for a smoother press, lowered X and Y buttons to make them closer in height and therefore easier to reach with the other buttons, white buttons for a clean, cool look, snapback capacitors to eliminate any inputs registered when the stick snaps back in the opposite direction than you flicked it, a tactile Z button to remove the mushy press from the Z button and replace it with crisp tactile feedback, and most importantly, full left notches. In Super Smash Bros, custom notches can help a lot with certain text, but in Mario Kart, these notches line up perfectly with the angles for soft drifting. So no more calibrating your controller every single time you play, pausing to calibrate when you forget to or it doesn't work, and having slightly inaccurate inputs in all other directions while playing the game, and also having miss inputs. There is one thing though, since the notches are right on the angles for soft drifting, if you go to the upper part of the notch, it will not be within the soft drifting range. This can be easier than you'd think when turning. The way this is avoided is by literally just playing. Even when you try to drift and it comes out slow, keep trying, and eventually you'll naturally stop pushing into the upper part of the notch. It just feels like it doesn't work at first, and the more you play, the better it works. For me personally, it felt like the right side wasn't even within the soft drifting range, but it turns out all I needed was to just play, and eventually it just kind of worked out. And now I can go into the notches and perfectly, and I mean perfectly, soft drift. In my previous video, I said it's easy to learn to soft drift, and that's still very true. But what I didn't realize is that there is indeed a big difference between soft drifting and perfect soft drifting. When you soft drift on a controller with a circular gate, it's easier for you to slip without realizing, and also you won't have that perfect consistency that I've come to realize mostly only professionals have. Not only does this make soft drifting perfect, but it also makes sure that any other direction that you have to press in other situations is perfect too, so you're almost eliminating miss inputs on a stick. Now it's important to note that you can still mistime your inputs, which is one of the biggest reasons you mess up while playing. That means starting a drift a little too late or holding a certain direction a little too long. Now there are some situations where you actually do want to drift a little bit under the soft drifting angle for a tighter turn, and it's really useful for that because there's notches right underneath that can help. I think one thing that we overlook a lot while talking about best controllers for games is the feel of the controller. The multi-shine GameCube controller feels better than anything I've ever tried. The triggers, the Z button, and just the shape, proportions, and size of the controller feel perfect. The GameCube controller in general feels amazing, and maybe that's why a lot of people seem to love it. There is really only one downside to the controller, and that is the price. The one that I have would have cost me $480 US, which by the way, yes, is more than the Nintendo Switch 2. You're probably thinking, isn't that an insane price for a Mario Kart controller? Well, the answer is yes. And it's understandable why. GameCube controllers are getting more and more expensive, and they hand build, okay, well not hand build, because they're GameCube controllers made by Nintendo, but they hand mod every single controller. Combine this with having to provide free shipping on orders over $280 US and parts, and you'll start to understand why it costs so much to buy this thing. But they do have other options. You can remove some of the mods that don't affect motion glider, or you could buy one of their Power 8 modded wired GameCube controllers. But these things won't feel quite as nice as if you did have the mods, because the triggers just won't feel quite as nice, the button heights, everything like that, but it will still feel really good. Now, Power A GameCube controllers connect directly to your Nintendo Switch, which means you won't need to buy one of these adapters, as well as the fact that they're much cheaper to buy. But the only mods you can get on these are the notches and the button height lowering. This should also be the best controller for Mario Kart World, unless Nintendo makes soft drifting angles sharper, which is extremely unlikely. In Mario Kart World, Nintendo is likely going to just keep it the same, or make it an exact 45-degree angle, and since these notches are just low enough to be slightly under the 45-degree angle, which is what allows it to fall perfectly into the soft drifting range, there won't be a difference at all. So if you aren't going to keep playing in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe even after the Switch 2 launches, or maybe you'll play a mix of both, then I would wait until Mario Kart World launches, and on launch day I'll make a video confirming that it works. Another thing for Mario Kart World is rail grinding. From what we know right now, you'll be able to adjust your tilt with the left stick while rail grinding in Mario Kart World, so we could see other advantages to notches with rail grind. To anyone who has bought a Spectra, especially on my recommendation, you didn't make the wrong choice. For what everyone knew up until right now, that was the best controller for the game, and is still the second best controller in the world. It was and still is an insane deal if you cannot afford any of Multi-Shine's controllers, then I would absolutely still recommend the Spectra to this day. Alright, trust me, I used to get so annoyed when nostalgia-blinded people would just glaze the GameCube and by extent the controller, saying that what we have now just isn't as good. But when it comes to the controller, it truly feels insane. And by the way, I think the Nintendo Switch Pro controller is an amazing feeling controller. I don't own it myself, but I've tried some that my friends own. It's an amazing feeling controller, and the Switch 2 Pro controller looked really good. We shouldn't hate the GameCube controller because it was made in 2001, and we shouldn't love it because it was made in 2001. It's just a good controller, and these mods make it feel even better. and also make it, in terms of tech and optimizations, the best controller for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and likely what will be the best controller for Mario Kart World.